Are you looking for inspiring conversations about faith, film, and life? You're in the right place. Here's the host who knows the right questions to ask, Father Edward Looney.
Hey everybody, it's Father Edward. Grateful you're tuning in for another conversation. And this week, I'd like to talk about friendship. We all have friends. You have your best friend, you have your work friends, probably you have your community friends. And so what is friendship? What are the basics of friendship? And what can we expect when maybe friendships come to an end? I am speaking today with Kristen Strong. She is the author of a new book from Thomas Nelson called Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. And so she's a friendship expert. And so I'm very excited to have this conversation just to delve deeper into the topic. So thank you so much, Kristen, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so of course we're talking about friendship. This is the crux of your new book that you have. And in the very first words you write in the book, in the introduction, you say, "Hello there, friend." And so already you kind of are addressing the reader as if they're a friend. So maybe can you kind of define friendship? Do we sometimes maybe use that word more loosely than maybe we should? Or why did you think starting the book "Hello, Friend" was good?
Well, I thought starting the book that way, because it's a very good question that you're asking. In general, I think we use the term friend very broadly and probably too broadly. And so here I am starting out with kind of a broad use of it myself. However, having said that, I really believe, what kind of makes somebody makes a kinship with a friend is when you share a common interest in something. And so I'm assuming if somebody picks up this book, they're interested in, or they are also one who is, like the title, desperate for friends in some sort of way. Maybe a big life change has happened and they kind of find themselves starting over from ground zero. Or maybe it's just been a slow, steady, and just landscape change where suddenly she's looking around and going, well, I used to have friends. Where are they now? And so since they are like me in common pursuit of friendship or wanting to at least, give some more bandwidth to this kind of topic and thinking like, what can I do to be a good friend to myself so I bring my best self to others? And what can I do to be a great friend to others? So therefore, I see the reader as a friend because we are like-minded in that pursuit.
Talking about friends then, so the broad sense of friendship, but we all have those very good friends. And I think sometimes friendship goes through different seasons, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But I know that who I would call my best friend, 15 years ago or 20 years ago from high school and such, from grade school and onward, I would still call them one of my best friends, but I haven't talked to that person probably since my mother's funeral back in 2017. So, we kind of lost touch. We don't live in the same town. They have a family. I have a parish family, so
Right.
it makes it a little complicated. So, but I think though, I think about my seminary days. There's one person in particular, we went to college seminary together. We went to major seminary together. So we spent 6 years together and in school, and we still talk probably once or twice a month. Whenever I see kind of a concerning social media post, I'll give that person a ring just to see what's going on. Is there something
Sure.
bad happening? So I think there are these different types of best friends that we could have. So who would you consider your best friend, or what's a story about your best friend that you would consider as such today?
Yeah. Well, I love what you bring up. I always feel like for every kind of rule you make about friendship, there's, 10 rules that break it. It's such a nuanced topic because I also have those friends like you who I may not have seen in 10 years. But if we were to get back together, right after this podcast interview, we'd pick right back up where, and just talk like we talked yesterday. And then there's those friends where, you may not talk for 10 years and then it may just, you get back together and you're like, oh, you know what? We've both kind of just gone different directions. I don't see our paths converging again. But I would say, my best friend, I do have what I consider a best friend. But I also have like just a tight group, not a huge group, but a tight group of, I would say, five probably really good friends that are just right there with my best friend. And I would say what makes a best friend is the one you can go vulnerable with. I mean, my best friend, her name is Amay, and I've never killed anybody, but if I did, she would know where the body was. So, but more than that, like I will just, she knows my now I will say there's always some parts of, I think, of all of us we save for God, that we share with God. We are our realest selves with God, or at least ideally that is the goal. But she knows a lot. Just she knows a lot. God knows the most, but she knows a lot. And in fact, I've told her, if I should come to an untimely demise, my journals are here. I'm going to need you to take them and burn them for me. So I would say, so my point with all of this is that I have been very vulnerable with her. She is very vulnerable with me. So there's that going back and forth with that. And I think that is probably the chief thing in a best friend.
Sure. The great philosopher Aristotle, he kind of demarked friendship in three different ways. He said that there was friendship of utility, meaning that I'm friends with this person because they're useful to me, that, they can help me, they can connect me with people, whatever, so friendship of utility. Then there's the friendship of pleasure. And then there's a friendship of based on their character. We have the same interests. We have the same values. So is that a way that you would look at friendship, kind of just in the different qualities of friendship? And maybe those three categories are a way that, that lens through which we could examine our own personal friendships?
Yeah, I would say so. I might tweak it though. Tim Keller talks about how, and maybe Tim Keller was quoting somebody else, but I just remember him saying it, how really any kind of friendship has an element of utility to it, has a element where you're getting something from them and they're getting something from you. And I think if we're honest, that's true. I guess I could see Aristotle's point in terms of, work friendships. Maybe there's more of a utilitarian component to those. But I tend to think, like Tim Keller, that really with all friendships, I mean, ideally there is a reciprocity going on with them, and what you are getting something from them, but they are also getting something from you. Because even if they're just for pleasure, that's still, there's still something to be, there's a benefit in that for you. So I guess that's maybe how I would tweak that.
Sure, sure. Now, what would you say to a person? And this is actually who I find myself to be. And so sometimes, like, I get discouraged by it or whatever. But I would say that a lot of times in the maintenance level of friendship, maintaining friendship or whatever, is that for me, I'm the person that always is the initiator. I'm the one that's always calling or texting or saying, hey, let's get together, let's catch up, let's do dinner, let's grab a cup of coffee. And so sometimes I've realized that some of those friendships, they kind of drift away a little bit because, I have a saying, and I'm sure, I picked it up from somewhere, but like the phone goes two ways. The phone both
Yes,
calls and receives calls. And so a lot of times I'm the caller, and sometimes I just want to receive that call. So, so
absolutely.
there have been times where some friendships, because I was the initiator, if I just, stopped initiating. For example, there was a guy went to seminary with. We would talk probably a few times each month. I actually went down, visited him at his parish when he became a pastor. But then my mother passed away. And so after she passed, like it was just 6 months of like trying to figure out, like, I gotta clean up her place, I gotta
Oh
sell the
yeah.
place. Like it was just so in that 6 months, a lot of my friendships kind of dissipated just because I wasn't initiating and nobody was reaching out to me. So, yeah, could you speak just to a little bit about maintaining friendships and how it's really both ways?
Yeah, no, one person cannot do the work of two people. All friendships require work, but one person cannot do the work for two people. And I have absolutely been there as well, where I feel like, golly, I mean, it would sure be great to receive some of what I feel like I'm pouring out to other people. And one thing I've come to find out, and I was a military wife for almost 20 years. And so we had a lot of starting over. There was a lot of me putting myself out there over and over again to make connections. And kind of what I discovered at that point in my life and in my point of life now, as a woman who has lived in Colorado Springs, Colorado now for almost 15 years, is that friendship really does always feel like, if you're intentional about it, friendship always feels like it is more work, that you are giving a lot more than you were receiving. So
Mm.
I have a great group of friends, and I can still kind of feel that way sometimes, like, wow, I'm sure reaching out a lot. And so, I guess where I've come to peace with that, though, is that at least at times there are others who are reaching out to me. It may not be as much as me, but there are those who are reaching out to me. So that's the one thing I've done to come to peace. Another thing is, I can be my personality. I'm kind of like a dog with a bone. I am happy to keep after something. And sometimes I have had to realize, like, okay, I am trying to do the work of two people here. This person, there's the expression, I can't remember who said it originally, friendships last for a reason, a season, or a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And maybe we were friends for a reason or a season, but we're just not meant to be friends for a lifetime. So I'm going to pivot my efforts towards those who welcome my me extending my hand in friendship, and hopefully will respond in kind. So yeah, but that is a hard thing. Like, I a couple of times I've just been like, oh, what's going on here? They're just, their life stage. And often it's not about me. Like, I've learned, I feel like I used to take that real personally. It's not about, oh, there's something wrong with me, so they just don't like me anymore. It's just about them and their bandwidth, what they're capable of doing. Because if we're honest, we all in our own lives, there have been people who've wanted to be friends with us that maybe we didn't feel that connection with them, that little spark, or because there's a whole ideology behind, friendship sparks too. But we just didn't connect with them, or it was just not the right time in life. We had a lot going on in other parts of our lives. And so we could not reciprocate with them. We all have to have our boundaries where we have them. And if we fall outside somebody else's, like, we will be okay. My friend Selena says, sometimes rejection is God's protection over what's not in your best interest. And so, or, his best for you. So I think remembering that. And then if a friendship fizzles, then for some reason it just wasn't his best for me. But it is hard in the moment. Like, that's not easy.
So your book is called Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. And the title of the book, it comes from your life as kind of on the move as a military wife, doesn't it? And the fact that
Yeah.
you'd pick up and then you'd have to meet new people, make new friends. And so what are some of the ways that you went about making friends once you made that move?
Yeah. Well, I had kind of three things I thought about. I thought about showing up, opening up, praying up. So showing up is, if I wanted friends, I needed to go to places where there were people. That is, I could not just hide in my house and expect them to apparate on my front porch like Harry Potter or something like that. So I had to get out and about. So I would, when I had young kids, we would do a lot of story times. Certainly we were church going folks, so we were doing that also every week. But sometimes churches can be a hard place to meet people. Sometimes churches, like communities, people have their people, and they're not always as interested in meeting new people. And again, there's a line. We all have our bandwidth, but sometimes I think we have more time to welcome new people than we think we do. And we never know when the Lord's going to do a new thing, and a new friendship is going to bless us. So I always say, we're never done finding our friends. It's just, we want to keep our hearts open to when the Lord might want to bless us with a new friendship. But anyway, I would show up at places where women were and, exercise classes, like I said, story times. When my kids were a little older, I was on I did PTA for a short amount of time. I really more often volunteered in my kids' classrooms, and I met a really good friend that way as well. So showing up where people are is very helpful. And then I would say opening up, like I really believe the best thing you can do to encourage a friendship is open up your own home. Invite somebody over for dinner, invite somebody over for coffee. I've invited folks over just for I maybe bought some cookies or something while kids played, or just while she and I chatted on the porch. But when you open up your home, there's something about that opens up your heart too. And it's not that every person I've invited into my home has become a good friend, but I will say my good friends have all been invited to my home. So there is something to be said for that. And then of course, just praying, because I mean, Jesus walked this earth with friends and he was perfect. So if he did that, if that was good for him, if that was God's will for him, it is certainly his will for us. None of us are the exception to that. I've been wounded by women. I've been left out and rejected, as we all have. Honestly, we all have, by our friends, men, women, however that plays out. But it is always worth it, again, to try to find the friends you need, and the Lord will see you to that. It just may not be on the timeline you would like it to be on.
Yeah. Well, also too, I think with friendship, as you build friendships and get to meet those people, maybe it's growing, it's developing, and then maybe there comes a point where you're like, I don't know if really we are that close of friends, and maybe we have a lot of differing opinions, and maybe this was a mistake or something like that. So how do you go about evaluating friendships, and how do you move on from a friendship if you decide like it's not healthy for you anymore?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, as a woman of faith, to me, that's a real Holy Spirit area where he kind of, you're praying about it, and he kind of leads you to, I always feel like he just gives me the feeling. And so I move from there. But I guess I would say too that, I would just, however you're being led about that. I mean, it's such a nuanced thing. I guess I would just say, praying hard about that, and seeing where you're directed. And in terms of then acting on it, that is tricky too, because, it's real hard to go, so, I did consider you a good friend, but not so much anymore. So I think we should not hang out anymore. I mean, that's sort of, I don't know that I would advise that, unless they're being, if you have a friend who's being toxic all of a sudden, and I've had this happen before too, where I have had to be rather direct about it. But if it's just sort of a slow, you're like, well, we're just kind of drifting in other areas now, and I just don't feel like this friendship is meant to be a part of my life anymore, then I think it's a matter of, you probably are just going to be making fewer suggestions for getting together. And that I have found in my life, when myself or somebody else that's that way, you just sort of read the room, as it were, and move accordingly. So if they're taking longer to respond to your texts, then you don't text bomb them, and make yourself a nuisance that way. But you're just honest about, okay, this has changed, but this doesn't need to reflect poorly on me. This is just a reality of changing circumstances in my life or in her life or his life. And, we're going to move in other directions now.
Yeah. I'm thinking about another type of friend that I know that a few people in my life, I know I have one of these people, and then I know that another group of people has that individual and such. But, and I don't know how to say it nicely, but like, there's like the friend that might be like a pity friend in a sense. Like, you just
Oh,
realize that maybe, their life, they don't have a lot of friends, and like for some reason they feel connected to you, and so they reach out to you, and so you talk to them, and you engage in conversation and whatnot, and maybe do something with them once, in a blue moon, but you kind of maintain connection with them because you feel bad. And like if you don't do it, well, who else is going to do that? So is that a
mm,
type of friendship? Do you think that's a real thing, or is that a bad type of friendship? Because I can name at least one person in my life that I feel bad for that person, and so I take their calls. I call them. I reach out, just because of their situation and their circumstance.
yeah. Well, you do bring up a good point because I have a couple of friendships in my life where, like we talked about at the beginning, ideally there's reciprocity with the friendship. But I do have a couple of friendships where I do feel called to speak into their life more than I'm receiving in return. And maybe some folks would, if you want to argue semantics, would call that, well, you're more mentor mentee. And, I don't really know the dividing line there. But I think that's okay. Like, I think if, I mean, listen, we are to die into ourselves. It's not always about what we're getting in return. Now, I would say you cannot have all your friendships be that way or
Yeah.
all friendships where you feel like you are giving and you are just not getting anything in return. Like then it's time to pray on the Lord bringing you some new friends and you participating in the work to make that happen. But I think it's more than okay to have that kind of a relationship um, with one or two folks. It just can't be, with everybody.
I want to go back to something we were talking about earlier, and it was just about kind of being on the move, you being a military wife and mom, and just moving around from place to place, based on assignments. And I'm curious, do you have friendships that have survived? And again, it could just be an occasional phone call, a text. You take interest in each other's posts on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. But I'm a priest, and so I move around. I
Yeah.
so far as a priest, I've been assigned in Oshkosh, in Brussels, and now in Shawano, Wisconsin. And so,
Mm.
but I would say there's still a few people from Oshkosh that I stay in occasional touch with. There are people from Brussels and Lincoln Rosaire that reach out, and I do go back for a funeral, or they call me to come to a birthday party, and so there are
Mm.
these friendships that do stand the test of time and stand, the distance. For me, it's within the same, state, within like an hour of each place. But did you find that some people that you did stay in touch with them?
I sure have. Yeah, some of my dearest friends are friends I made 25 25 years ago. And we haven't lived in the same place since, I don't know, 2003 or something like that. So, um, yeah, I absolutely can. I think what kind of determines that is when you've had in-person time with people, like in-person time and a good deal of it. I mean, they say it takes what is it, 200 hour, no, 50 hours to make a casual friend, 2 to 300 to make a good friend. So when you've spent hundreds of hours with somebody, even, if you were only there a couple of years or 3 years, um, and then you spread out, hither and yon, and you haven't lived in the same place, you still have that kind of glue that binds you together. And so, yeah, we will still certainly send texts every once in a while. We'll talk on the phone. I know, which is probably sounds very Gen X, but we do talk on the phone and we will comment on social media and stuff. Now, there's certainly been people we were friends with that we have drifted apart. We haven't seen him since we lived in, Dayton, Ohio, or wherever it was. And it has not kind of lasted. And maybe we are friends on social media, but, we aren't doing anything beyond that. And so I think, though, that what's the common denominator is that in-person time where you've gotten to hang out with somebody. Because I love social media and that it has helped me to meet some great folks, but that cannot be the beginning and the end of it. I think for you to get the most out of that friendship, that time has to move in person, in one way or another. Yeah, so I definitely have those friendships that extend from, even though we haven't lived or seen each other in a while, we still are good friends, and they know, what's up with my family, with the kids, and not just with me, so.
Yeah. Yeah. In our, just to maybe go to a point too that we've kind of talked about a little bit, but not extensively. And that's just simply the fact of Jesus being a friend of ours, God being our ultimate friend as well. And so, in the Catholic tradition, Saint Aelred of Rievaulx, who was an English
Oh.
abbot, he talked about spiritual friendship and how, friends can be united in the spiritual way and help each other in the spiritual life and such. And there are other saints in the Catholic tradition that kind of have played that out, like Saint Francis de Sales and Saint Jane Frances de Chantal, for
Mm.
example. So there's spiritual friendship in that regard. And then, there's that old hymn, what a friend we have in
Oh, yes,
Jesus,
I
you
love
know.
that.
And so Jesus is our friend, of course. There's this other goofy little song I often see on social that floats. It's like, Jesus is a friend of mine. Jesus is a friend. It's just that reminder, Jesus is a friend. And so in my diocese, our bishop has really put us on a trajectory of discipleship. And so he says that the first step of discipleship is realizing that Jesus is your friend and befriending
Mm.
Jesus. And Jesus befriends you, you befriend Jesus, and you spend time with Jesus in prayer and in his word and all of that. So, yeah, how can we view this spiritual friendship with the Lord then, in our own cultivating of a spiritual life? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think when Jesus is our friend, we are a better friend to our friends. and and but more than that, like Jesus is the friend that never ever fails us. And every person is going to fail us at some point. If you're my friend, I might forget your birthday or forget to pick up your mail when you're out of town and you've asked me to. I am going to mess up. We humans are, but Jesus, the Son of God, is not going to, and he is the friend that never fails. He's also a wonderful guide in how to just conduct ourselves as a friend. He certainly made himself available to needy people, and I love that. I talk in the book about how, my story isn't one so much that thinking of my growing up years, I was never the mean girl, but I was the needy girl 6 ways from Sunday, and I could be overwhelming as a friend. And so, what I love about Jesus is you cannot overwhelm him. Not only that, he welcomes all your neediness. He's like, give it all to me. And when you go to him first, also, as I've discovered, the, I don't overwhelm my friends then when I'm filled up on him. And that looks like being in the word every day, perhaps listening to worship music, but also, I'm a big journaler. So I, write out my prayers to him and everything. But then I'm also a better friend to others. And I've come to, honestly, and there's something really special too when you find that friend who does have a really great friendship with Jesus, and a really great. I mean, they see him as they see Jesus as their savior, but they also just see him as their great friend. They're also really attractive to be around too. Like they're a great friend themselves. So yeah, just really, you cannot overestimate how far Jesus will go to be a good friend to all of us, and who just loves us enough that he died on the cross. So it took our sins and everything, but he takes our, all of our friendship baggage as well, and instead gives us a good place to start from for finding the friends that we need.
Yeah, talking about Jesus, being a friend of Jesus, how that makes you a better friend, reminds you of that wonderful song of Michael W. Smith, friends are friends forever if the
Oh
Lord's the
yes,
Lord of them,
of
and a
them. Yep.
friend will not say never. And it goes on, but
Uh-huh.
that was a great song growing up, and so I just that reminder that the Lord is the Lord of your friendships. And, I think
Hmm.
when we talk about husbands and wives, the goal of husbands and wives is to help each other to get to heaven. And I think that's what a friend does, is to reorient us and help us to get to heaven too. And so,
Amen.
maybe
Yeah.
going back to that idea of looking at, maybe this friendship isn't the best one. Well, maybe if they're leading me down a bad road, yeah, maybe that is a friend
Yeah.
I need to cut out. So,
Yeah,
um,
and along those lines too, I was thinking about I one of the best books I've ever read on friendship is called Made for Friendship by Drew Hunter. And he talks about how friendship are like, it's like lanes. And listen, you may be in the same lane with a friend, like you and I were talking earlier, but that friend then may move lanes. And if you overwhelm them, they're going to just look for an exit. And so that's, also that means a lot to me too, because I think I could be kind of an overwhelming friend. Whereas you have to let people travel in their lane. And if that's no longer in yours, then you just have to have open palms and say, I wish, the best for you. But like you said, maybe they're traveling in a lane you got no business being in the first place. And so, and sometimes we don't always recognize that until, the rearview mirror of life. But yeah, that's the great thing about Jesus, is he is always in our lane, and he's happy to be there. He's more than happy to be there. He doesn't see you as the friend who's kind of taking a lot more than, he's giving. Of course he doesn't. He gives a lot too, but yeah, that's the great thing about Jesus.
who's the reader that you wrote this book for?
Oh goodness, it is for the woman who is having a hard time making it friends, or the man. The man, a fella could read it too. It's just I am a woman, so I know what it is to be a woman. But it is for the person who is perhaps struggling to find friends. We are back in 2023. The Surgeon General, the Surgeon General said we were in a loneliness epidemic and in the United States, and the research certainly shows that more people feel like they don't have friends than do. So I just wrote it for the person who wants to find her people, but maybe needs a little direction and encouragement in how to do that and how to persevere through it.
Well, that's wonderful. I hope that person picks up a copy of the book. And if people do want to pick up a copy, or if they want to give you a follow on social media, how can they do that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can find the book is anywhere you purchase books. So you can find that there. Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. Also, my website is KristenStrong.com, and my name is spelled with an E-N, Kristen. But then also I'm that on social media. And Instagram's where I show up the most. So at Kristen Strong.
Well, wonderful. Well, if people are looking to grow in friendship, and they can give you a follow and find some more helpful tips, more than what they've received from this podcast interview today. So thank you so much, Kristen, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure to be here.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. And don't forget to stay up to date with what Father Edward is doing by following him on Facebook, X, or Instagram at the handle @FrEdwardLooney. Thanks for listening, and please join Father Edward again next time for another inspiring conversation.